has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, Pohlad. Tuck awaits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined by my tag partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up? Welcome to the show, everybody. Episode 101. Just did episode 100 a couple days ago, rolling right into the next 100. So let's get it going.
So no warming up with the bullpen today. We got a great guest on Tablesetters, Declan Goff. He's the executive producer of Purple Daily and the SKOR North Twins show. If you follow Minnesota sports, you probably already know his voice and his work. He's been covering the Vikings and Twins for years, helping drive some of the most engaging sports talk in the Twin Cities. Today, we're going to get into all what it's like covering the Twins during this really chaotic stretch and his thoughts on where this franchise is heading after its latest reset. So, Declan, how's it going, man?
It's good, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys reaching out and the kind words. I'm always looking for good baseball podcasts, which is a big reason why I started this thing on the SKOR North Twin Show side with covering the Twins. So, appreciate you guys having me on and excited to talk some ball.
Yeah, I mentioned to you kind of off air when we first contacted you, we like to do these team-centric episodes every once in a while, and the best part about it is getting to talk to people like yourself that kind of focus and get that expertise of someone that's watching that team day in or day out. So we're going to jump right into it here. The ownership story. Let's start with that. Caught a lot of people off guard recently. On August 13th, the Pohlad family announced they would not be selling the Twins after all. Even though many outside Minnesota assumed a sale was on the horizon. So let's start there. Give us your initial thoughts when they reversed course.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty big surprise. Publicly, they put the team on the market almost a year ago, about 10 months ago. And I think a lot of fans, and judging by comments from Rob Manfred at All-Star Week, everyone was expecting a sale or some type of transition plan to be happening probably by the end of the season, but definitely sooner rather than later. And then the decision for them, the Pohlads, that is, to pull the team back into their own hands, essentially, pull it off the market, bring in these two minority investors we still don't really know much about. One is locally based in Minnesota, one is an East Coast-based investment group that is going to have some type of stake in the Twins. It's definitely, I would say, mostly a gut punch to the Twins fan base. They've had a pretty cantankerous relationship with the fans and the owners this team was almost contracted 30 years ago. I know they did bring 2 World Series championships here in 87 and 91. But 2 years ago, and it's been obviously well documented by a lot of people over the last few weeks, is, they finally snapped their playoff streak. This place, I'm at Target Field right now. I mean, the place was as lively as it's ever been. They win their playoff series. Things are trending well. And then last year happens and there's a collapse, and that's an on-field performance product. But I think fans were kind of ready for ownership to get out of the way and get a new fresh face in here. I mean, that's what's happened with the Timberwolves here, and that turned into an ugly saga too with the transition plan. Regardless, though, both the Timberwolves and the Twins fan bases were ready for a change in ownership, and their decision to pull the team off the market, I don't think is great for morale. And, they said in the public statement that, they're inspired by these changes, and they hear the passion and they hear the vitriol. But short of spending like the New York Yankees or the Dodgers in free agency, which they don't really have the resources or really any type of history of doing, I don't really see any way fans get bought back in to this team for probably a foreseeable future. Like, winning helps, but obviously they're not even doing that right now either.
I noticed, so Byron Buxton came out and kind of voiced support for the current ownership, and saying kind of it gives him stability, although so much of the roster was just gone. So the stability, kind of, that word strikes me as interesting, I guess you could say. Do you think that shows disconnect between the fans and the clubhouse, or is he just trying to come out and say the right thing?
I think a little bit mostly of the latter, of he's trying to say the right thing. And I do think Buxton is loyal to this organization that's drafted him and has been patient with him, and vice versa. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's seen some bad baseball here. He's been He's been hampered by a lot of different type of injuries, but also when he's healthy, and we're seeing it through the course of this season, he's one of the 5-10 best players in baseball. So he's also someone just observing from behind the scenes, covering the team the last 2 seasons. He leads by example, and he sticks to his work and his routine, and he's very routine and focused and oriented. So like, I know he's from Georgia. He's from like a couple hours from Atlanta in a small town called Baxley. But I think he would rather be comfortable here than uprooting himself and his family. He does have that no trade clause too, so he'd have to waive it. So I do think he's okay with seeing this through. But it is, I think what the bummer is like the Twins essentially from ownership, even the fans, like they're now kind of wasting maybe the prime years of Byron Buxton, right? I mean, he's been in the league for 10 years, but this has been obviously his best full season, and he's had a couple blips on the injured list, but it feels like kind of a wasted opportunity, obviously, because your best player is finally healthy and producing at a high level.
So, Declan, this all ties back to the long-term future of the team in Minnesota. The lease at Target Field runs through 39, and there's been some framework to extend another 20 years to 59. I know that's been all in the media in Minnesota, which that deal depends on lawmakers approving the continuation of the stadium sales tax. So the legislator chose not to extend the tax this summer. The minutia and all those details, it left the situation unresolved. So adding to the fact the attendance has been slipping, and it's easy to see why some of the fans feel uneasy. How secure on your end do you feel the Twins' future is in Minneapolis? And do you think relocation could ever become a legitimate concern down the line, or are those fears overstated when it comes to the Twins in Minnesota?
I think they're probably overstated. I would be very surprised if indeed the Pohlads are going to be owning this team for a foreseeable future. I would be shocked if they put them anywhere else. Now, there's always that risk when new ownership comes in, and there was some of the fear even when they were on the market of, well, if someone comes in, would they ever move them? You brought up the fact that they're in a lease still for a good amount of time. I mean, the public support right now, thankfully, like it's not something where the lease is up like soon, because if it was up soon, I might have a different type of answer, but I would be pretty shocked. And I know this state lost a hockey team, which we're called the state of hockey, and we're known for the state of hockey, so it's definitely always a possibility. But baseball, as we've seen with the realignment talk, they're more interested in expansion, I think, than they are relocation. And look, I know you guys have probably talked about it, the Athletics and the Rays without stadiums, playing in minor league parks, that is something that has to get resolved, or they maybe will just do relocation because they can't find any place for these guys to play. But for the Twins side, I would be shocked if they ever left the state.
So obviously well publicized, the Twins end up moving 10 major league players at the deadline. Carlos Correa, Griffin Jax, Johan Duran, on and on and on. The front office called it a reload rather than a teardown. Give me your opinion on that. With so many departures and payroll stripped away, do you think that's an honest description, or was it more a super dramatic reset as you see it?
It's both. I think when the initial trades were happening and we got through the deadline time, I think the thought process was, okay, especially with the Correa situation, that they're clearing up money to make maybe the books a little easier to complete an ownership sale. That being said, I actually kind of liked some of the moves they did. They didn't have much of any. And because of the trades, they now have like the second best prospect pool in baseball, which is great. But before the trade deadline and before like the nuking of the roster, they didn't really have major league pitching prospects that were ready to jump into the big leagues. Now they have a bunch of those, and any team knows that you can run out of starting pitching depth in a second. I actually didn't hate a lot of the trades. The Louis Varland one probably was the most shocking because he had finally graduated into this high leverage role, and with them trading Duran a few days earlier, it kind of was like putting the pieces together like, okay, so Louis Varland's probably this team's future closer. He's also from Minnesota, so he has this great ties to the team, and that one was probably the most shocking. I mean, I know the Correa one would end up being a shock, but I think people were just confused because a lot of these guys were getting near arbitration or near free agency, so it's time to maybe move on from the rentals like Bader and Castro. Those all made sense, but some of the ones, especially like Varland, I think was the one that took me by surprise. But I really like what they have in Mick Abel, what they got in the Duran trade. Taj Bradley has scuffled a little bit at AAA, but Derek Falvey was very high on him, calling him one of the best young pitchers in baseball. So I like some of these moves. Alan Rodin, who they got in that Varland trade, unfortunately, he just had thumb surgery. He's out for the year. which is too bad. But I didn't hate some of the trades, and this was a core that was, for the last few years, positioned to be winning the Central Division, and they only made the playoffs once in the last 5 years. So I was for kind of the retooling of it, and I know that might be a little bit of lip service, but I wasn't against it fully. But it is kind of confusing to figure out, did that come from just ownership, or from the front office, or did it come from ownership?
Were you relieved to see them stop short of trading Joe Ryan? I know there was that Fox Sports report that came out preemptively, and then they took it back. So I'm guessing there was some real smoke to that, or real fire to that smoke there. Were you relieved to see him stay?
Yeah, I am. And if I were the Twins, and if you're looking to at least get some type of face back with your fans or good morale with your fans, it would be extending Joe Ryan, like immediately. I know he got hit around last night, but he's a frontline pitcher in baseball, and he still has control left, so like they don't have to re-sign him. I think it'd be wise to re-sign him. To answer your question, if they were to trade him at the deadline, yeah, I mean, I heard the hauls that they were trying to get back were huge, and I expect if they do maybe trade him in this winter or this offseason, that price would also still be enormous. I'm in the camp of you should keep him. Now, with their payroll in flux or just question marks around it, Pablo Lopez is making almost $22 million for the next 2 seasons after this. Do they have the slots to keep Pablo and Joe Ryan, in the $20+ million range for the foreseeable future? Is it like a swap, which is basically what they did with Sonny Gray? They said goodbye to Sonny Gray. They paid Pablo Lopez. Like, would they do the same thing from paying Pablo Lopez, trading him, and then paying Joe Ryan? I would personally pay Joe Ryan, and honestly, that price is only going to go up, so you may as well jump on it as soon as you can.
On a lighter note, with all these moves, what were your thoughts on the Twins kind of essentially giving Johan Duran's his bullpen entrance, over to the Phillies? Were you okay with it? Does it kind of leave a sour taste in your mouth? What were your thoughts on that?
From a fan base side, it's definitely a little sour. We didn't get to experience that entrance with that type of vibe much since the playoff run a couple years ago, if I'm being honest. Like, he had an epic one here, I think it was over July 4th weekend or the week afterwards, so like just a couple weeks before the trade when I think it was the Cubs were in town. Nelly was doing a post-game concert here, so like I think it's the only sellout they've had all season at Target Field, and they're down in attendance this season. And the entrance for that one was amazing. The entire stadium was rocking. It's just tough when it's the Phillies. Like if it's the Phillies and the Yankees and the Dodgers, these big market teams with very loud fan bases. I think a lot of Twins fans have a problem with that. Personally, I don't have too much of an issue with it. He was called Durantula. There was some talk of like they never marketed that. Maybe they should have marketed that. I do know they called him Durantula. That was a thing that was here as well. But I think Twins fans have a tough time when it's like a big market like Philadelphia that is basically now reaping the benefits of a good player and a really cool entrance as well.
So you mentioned Pablo Lopez before. There was the August Star Tribune piece that came out from Phil Miller saying that Pablo Lopez admitted the Twins could not really, quote unquote, keep it medium, saying they soared too high after wins, sang too low after losses. So now with the roster turnover, several veterans now gone, who's going to be providing the steadiness that Lopez believes is missing? Is it Lopez? And is it realistic to expect him to step into that role? Or is there someone else you have in mind over there?
Yeah, Lopez is definitely in that role. He's a really interesting guy to talk to. He's a very intellectual guy. He talks about things of life that sometimes like blow my mind, where he's very into breathing. He's very into these exercises that he uses his mind as well. So like he's all about these kind of kinetic things sometimes, which is cool to hear about. I do think he's one of those leaders in the locker room already. Ryan Jeffers has always been kind of the voice, I would feel like, of the locker room. He's always gracious to the media, at least. So I would say if a media person were to ask that's in the locker room a lot, like myself, that you would probably lean Jeffers because he's very candid and open about a lot of things. And that's another guy, too, that I would probably be in the camp of giving an extension. He wouldn't ask for the moon, and nor do you have to overpay for Ryan Jeffers, but that'd be someone, too, that would provide some stability. Buxton, again, going back to what we kind of talked about earlier, he's a quiet guy, and he just wants to mostly stick to his routines, and people are aware of his incredible ability. But I wouldn't necessarily call him like a huge vocal leader. I know he held a big team dinner, I think, the night of the trade deadline in Cleveland, just to kind of get the group refocused and try to get a semblance of what do we have here and what's the plan the rest of the way. But I would say Pablo is in that camp of a leader. Jeffers is for sure in that camp of a leader. Royce Lewis, who's having a down season this year, at the plate at least, I think he has the ability to 100% like lead a team and be a captain of a team if they can get him back right. He's battled injuries this year. He's now been healthy, but some of those numbers are still not what we're accustomed to seeing from him. So I think Royce is someone that they'd like for them to graduate into a leader. And I can see him too. He has leadership type of traits written all over him.
So I was going to ask you that about Royce Lewis as my follow-up question. Really, just how does the fan base view him? I can see him being a future leader of this clubhouse and being a guy that essentially was a future superstar in the making. Do Twins fans still hold out hope that he could be that guy in the future for them?
I think they hold out hope for him, yes. I think there's confusion, though, on what's happening here, like with him at the plate, but not even just Royce himself. They've had, you look up and down the lineup, and any mainstay or any cornerstone player of the Twins is pretty much a first-round pick that they have drafted and cultivated up and down, from Trevor Larnach's to Matt Wallner's to Buxton's to Royce Lewis. All these guys are first, and in Buxton and Royce Lewis's case, top 2 picks in their drafts. And for whatever reason, there seems to be this stall out in the prime years where they should be taking the next step. And sure, baseball's like a game of adjustments, right? Like you're going to come up and you might have success early. Then there's information on you and how pitchers can get you out, or how obviously the other way around works too, from hitters versus pitchers. But it feels like there's a stall out. And is that development? Is that coaching? Is it some of the clubhouse stuff that might not be on the field that like lingers in the back of a mind? We all know this is an incredibly mental game. So yeah, it's confusing because they fired their hitting coach. Like David Popkins got fired pretty much immediately after the season. He gets hired by Toronto overnight, and we're seeing now Toronto kind of being back to what they should be. And they bring in Matt Borgschulte, who had used to work in the minor leagues in this organization. And it's definitely a different approach. There's not as much like free swinging and home runner bust mentality that was under Popkins. But it does feel strange that a guy like Royce Lewis, to your point, has these highs where he's maybe at his peak one of the 10 best players in baseball, but at his lows, and the numbers bear this out, legitimately one of the 10 worst hitters in base. Like, why is it so extreme, and how come there's not either consistency or leveling up in a lot of these players' games?
Yeah, I remember even as a fantasy baseball player, I think probably all of us have rostered Royce Lewis at one point, and it's quite the roller coaster because, as you said, there's weeks that go by where he's hitting a home run or a double like every single day. And then I remember the end of last season, it was as if he could not touch the ball at all, strikeout central. But the peak of Royce Lewis just seems incredibly high if he can stay healthy. I know you mentioned earlier that you were pretty happy with some of the returns that you got in these deals for the Twins. For the Duran deals, Mick Abel, shown glimpses of maybe being able to be a frontline starting pitcher. Eduardo Tate, 18-year-old catcher, obviously further away, but these players come way faster than they used to up to the major leagues, it seems. Give us some thoughts on those two guys, and when do you think we may be seeing them at the major league level?
So I'll start with Abel. So I watched him. The AAA affiliates, the St. Paul Saints, are obviously just down the road here from Minneapolis. So it's an awesome luxury that their AAA affiliate is legitimately a 20-minute car ride down Interstate 94. So I watched Abel pitch, not this previous start, but 2 starts ago, earlier this month for his second start in St. Paul. And he had a shaky outing. It was kind of the things that in his scouting report and in his brief time with the Phillies up in the majors this year, he's battled some control issues, but he has incredible swing and miss stuff. Those taller, lankier type of guys like Abel, the mechanics become very difficult to repeat. And I think he's a frontline starter. And I'm pretty sure we're probably going to see him make maybe only one more start in St. Paul before he's up here in September. I'd be shocked if he doesn't get some type of run with the big league club here for the majority of the final month of the season. And Tate, look, I think you take as many chances as you can on catching prospects. They did the same thing with Jimenez, who they got in the Paddock trade, and both those guys are off to blistering starts. It's just difficult because it feels like, you brought up a fantasy baseball type of situation. It feels like with catchers in the big league level, like there's 5 really, really good ones, right? Like there's 5 good ones. Then if you were to rank the 6th best catcher and the 14th ranked catcher, they're pretty much all the same dude, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also like the backup catcher who's typically always like defensive first and very challenged offensively. So I don't know if those guys end up staying at catcher, but I think they're very intriguing prospects. And, Tate's one of the best prospects in baseball, it seems like. So yeah, just refill the cupboard. And if eventually these guys help you compete down the line, or, once you're winning again, maybe, and maybe even next year they can be competitive again, you then use the same thing you did. You use that as a resource to buy something at the trade deadline. So I think Abel's going to be part of this pitching plans in September and probably has a good shot of making the opening day roster in 2026. And Tate, we'll see how he kind of develops throughout the years.
So one of the bright spots from the Twins this year is Luke Keeschel overcoming Tommy John surgery and a fractured forearm from in April being hit by a pitch. And he's returned with some energy. We've seen production from him. Do you see Keeschel's toughness and some versatility making him one of the defining figures of this, essentially the next core of what Minnesota wants in their baseball team?
Yeah, he's been awesome. I mean, he's probably the most exciting thing they have going for him, including with Byron Buxton having a good year. And again, I know Joe Ryan got hit around yesterday, but he's having a great season. Keeschel has just this energy and honestly a big-time swagger, too, when you kind of watch him in person. That's a little different. He's a younger guy, right? He's only 21, 22 years old. He's come up here and hit immediately, which is incredibly difficult to do. Defensively, I'm not sure where he fits. Second base has been a little bit of a journey for him, and he spent some time in the outfield. He has spent some time at first base in the minors. He had Tommy John surgery about a year ago this time. So now Tommy John surgery, as you guys know, for a hitter, it's a lot different than a pitcher. You can come back from it quicker. It's not as invasive. But I don't know where he fits defensively, but the dude absolutely rakes the plate. And this team, from blowing up the core and blowing up their roster, they're probably the slowest team in baseball. And he brings an advantage of athleticism and speed that they have not had in a long time here. So if they want to lean into some of that, Rocco Baldelli comes from the Rays, where we all know how much they play small ball and play within those margins as good as anyone. So does the Cleveland Guardians. So if they want to lean into that style, Keeschel is like the poster child, and also not even just a scrappy player that's getting by. Like, we're seeing the numbers. I don't know if he's going to hit 340 in his career, but if you're talking about a dude that's hitting 300 and provides that energy and spark, that's a top of the lineup fixture for years to come.
Obviously, no matter how all these pieces of the puzzle end up fitting together, the financial situation kind of looms over everything. Payroll projections have the Twins at around the $100 million mark, which would put them towards the bottom of the league. Detroit obviously trending upward. Cleveland's always in the mix. Kansas City has shown the willingness to keep their guys and spend around the edges a little bit. Is it realistic to think the Twins can turn this around quickly and compete in 2026? Or is this, if we're being realistic, let's put our thoughts more to 2027, 2028?
So I think there's a path for them to be competitive again in 26 and be a better team than they are right now. The issue, I guess, to go back to an earlier question you had about the trade deadline and my early thoughts, is they nuked the entire bullpen. The bullpen is gone. They have two guys basically that were in that opening day bullpen. And as you guys know, buying relievers on the free agent market is expensive to do. On the trade market, we saw it here. They cost a ton. So the biggest questions I'd have going forward next year is, what are their bullpen plans? Because I think starting pitching wise next year, if they keep Pablo Lopez, which is a big if, and they keep Joe Ryan, I think that's as good as a 1-2 punch as any team in baseball from a depth side. And they also have, guys like Bailey Ober. He has struggled this year, but we just brought up Mick Abel and Taj Bradley, and Zebby Matthews has shown glimpses this year with the team. So, starting pitching, I'm very intrigued by, and I think they actually can hold their hat on that. And then if they can find their identity on offense, if that's leaning into speed and defense and playing within the margins, then I think this team could be a competitive team that competes for the wild card. I think assuming, though, the offseason will tell us what they're going to do, but I think assuming that they're favorites to win the Central next year and come right back and be at the top are probably far-fetched. But I don't think this team was heading towards something like the Chicago White Sox, where the White Sox and Rockies are going to be bad for a very long time. And look, it was about a year ago this time that this team started to collapse, and over that last year, they have been, I think, the third or fourth worst record in baseball. But I think there's a better team in there, but got to figure out your bullpen, and you have to find your identity as an offense. Starting pitching, you have checked, but everything else, those are big ifs. So they could be competitive, but I think we'll have to wait and see what the roster looks like.
You mentioned Taj Bradley by name, but among some of the other players coming back, building depth in the minor leagues, James Outman, you also got Kendrick Rojas, Ryan Gallagher, longer-term pieces. Are any of those names the ones you recognize as the newcomers that will matter most come 2026, or is there someone else we didn't mention that was acquired at the deadline?
So organizationally, Kalen Culpepper, their first-round pick from last year, is having an unbelievable year. I would probably put him as the betting favorite to be their minor leaguer of the year from that they always award at the end of the year. Kalen Culpepper probably would get some run with the Saints here soon in AAA, and then probably factors into their 2026 plans. Maybe not opening day roster, but I wouldn't say it's complete far-fetched for him not to make it. Culpepper's in there. They have Gabby Gonzalez, who they got in the Jorge Polanco trade a year ago, and Gabby had a pretty rough year last year. He was like a fringe top 100 prospect when they acquired him, has a really rough season at the plate this year. I mean, he started in high A ball, and now he's in AAA, and has just hit everywhere he's went. So I think he's part of those plans. So like I think a couple of guys like that are interesting. It is too bad Alan Roden got injured because again he played with that speed and that kind of different prowess that they haven't had in a long time, and he's accomplished everything there is in the minors, and now he's out for the year. It's a missed opportunity for him. But yeah, there's some interesting prospects here. Walker Jenkins is obviously their top dude. I don't think he might be able to get here by next year at some point. Injuries have been a big thing for him, but they have some really interesting prospects that are knocking on the door in Abel and Taj Bradley. And I know Bradley maybe you don't consider a prospect because he's been in the big leagues so long, but there's some interesting pieces that are in the minor leagues currently that I think do help them out next season.
I will say, as a Wake Forest baseball fan, I was saying before the draft, Mark Houston, whoever gets this guy is going to be lucky. He just one of those players who strikes me as someone who does everything well and will continue to get better year after year. And to me, he seems like one of those guys that when he gets to the big leagues, who knows when that is, I just feel like he could be the face of a team and like that quiet clubhouse leader that just does things right. Early thoughts on Mark Houston in their system now?
Yeah, he was here at the ballpark, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I wasn't able to personally sit down and meet him, but Rocco Baldelli, the manager of the Twins, talked about how very, very stoic he was. Yeah, very serious, very professional. And maybe I can flip this back to you as someone who's watched more Wake Forest baseball than I have. So the reports and everything on him, right, are he's a slick, very smooth defensive shortstop, plays in that short porch at Wake Forest. They don't know if that power's legit. I was just checking out his numbers, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and he is off to a nice start. I think he even got promoted already, which is a good sign. I mean, do you think that bat, if you've watched some Wake Forest baseball, I mean, do you think that bat plays at the big league? Do you think there is some power in there? Or is he just more of like, just to your point, a steady, good ball player? Maybe not a super high ceiling, but maybe just a contributing Major League Baseball player.
I think the floor is kind of what you said, like very steady. Maybe he's only hitting 250 and he's more of a doubles guy, but he's going to play good defense and he's still going to feel like a plus on the team. I think the ceiling, he'll surprise some people with the power. It's tough to see how that's going to translate from college. He hit plenty of home runs at Wake, but again, you're playing metal bats. The dimensions might be a little different. So that's tough to see how that translates to Minnesota. But I don't know. Maybe it's the bias in me. I'd be excited as a Minnesota fan for him. Like I said, at worst to be a contributor and at best to be possibly an all-star. That's how I see him.
Well, and they have, Kalen Culpepper is a shortstop. Brooks Lee, who has a huge opportunity here to prove that he can belong and be your everyday shortstop. He's here right now. Obviously, Houston's a shortstop. They have shortstops all over the place. And look, I'm not a huge scouting guy. I spend time looking at the prospect rankings, and I do watch some Saints games since they're just down the road. But I'm well aware that if you draft as many shortstops and center fielders as possible, you kind of just let them fall down to where they go, right? Whether that's in another spot or wherever they want to be. So draft some athletic guys, and I think they'll I think they kind of figure out where they fall after that.
Yeah, I mean, basically the entire first round of the draft this year, I'd say 95% of the guys taken were shortstops, and not all those guys are going on to play shortstop. I think it just increases their value. But you mentioned quickly Rocco Baldelli talking about Houston. So he remains the public face of accountability for this team. He takes accountability, says the right things, defends ownership while taking personal responsibility. Here's the thing. If things don't improve as quickly as ownership wants them to, does he end up being the guy that falls on the sword and he's gone sooner than we expected?
Yeah, it's a tough situation because if the Pohlads are here and Derek Falvey isn't going anywhere, they're going to keep Rocco around. They're very tight with one another, and getting to know Rocco over the last few years has been honestly a great enjoyment. I actually really like talking baseball with him, and if I'm being honest with you guys, like him off the microphone and him maybe not in front of cameras, it's a different cat. It's a different guy, which I appreciate because it helps you kind of build some relationships and rapport and get some information on some things. But if new ownership had come in, yeah, I think he's gone. And I do think sometimes we overblow and we overplay the fact of how much the manager have an influence on it. But to your point, they've missed playoffs. They're about to miss the playoffs for the fourth time in 5 years. You have your ace pitcher saying the clubhouse dynamics are strange. He's a very, I would say, hands-off manager in terms of, like, he's not going to go in there and start cracking skulls. Like, that's just not, he would rather have the players deal with the accountability and deal with any problems before he steps in. But, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be completely shocked or upset if they had decided to move on. But I think if you're asking me right now, and look, the option was picked up already for 2026, so he is under contract to be this manager next season. I think they could benefit from a change, but if the current leadership is in place, I don't see a change necessarily being made.
I mean, that's the conversation over here in New York as well with Aaron Boone. The conversation is like, yes, you want to hold them accountable for the stretch of baseball that they're playing, and there's unacceptable mistakes, but there's also the alignment with the front office, and that is making them more secure than ever. You mentioned Rocco in the front office for Minnesota, but the same thing with Aaron Boone and the Yankees. Everything has to kind of fall in line, and they're working more cohesively than ever. You're not making a lineup sheet in a vacuum anymore. It happens in a big step, and I'm sure Rocco is very much collaborative with the team at the top of the office.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Falvey's in there, every post game for the most part. And there definitely are things that Rocco does that, as the manager, that he's gonna do. I thought he was managing his ass off in the Dodgers series and leading up to the deadline, when it was basically after the All-Star break, if they didn't get it going, like, they were going to be sellers, and that ends up what happened. But I look, there's a collaboration now, to your point, in baseball, with the president of baseball operations and the manager, and the bench coach. His bench coach here is Jace Tingler, who obviously used to manage the Padres. I know both Rocco and Jace bounce things off each other all the time in game, so it's not necessarily like the front office dictating what they do at all times, but collaborating has been at a high that we've never seen before, basically, in baseball. And you're seeing it with the Yankees. You're seeing it here with the Twins. It's interesting. It's interesting for sure.
So right now the Twins have the 8th worst record in baseball, giving them a 7.5% chance of landing that number 1 pick and a 90% chance of drafting 8th or better. So if you want to do silver lining, looking for things to look forward to, the postseason hopes are gone. Do you believe a top 3 pick could be transformative for the future of this franchise in the immediate? We've seen these players come and contribute almost immediately if you can get one of these guys at the top of the draft.
Yeah, it's not as difficult for some of these top picks, to your point, in baseball to make an impact sooner rather than later. Where 15 years ago, it was you're going to wait 3 years before you see them. They moved up the draft lottery a couple years ago, and that's how they got Walker Jenkins. Brooks Lee, I know eye test wise or just raw numbers wise, like, hasn't necessarily looked the part, but he got up here pretty dang quick. Luke Keeschall got up here quick. So yeah, if you are in a position where you climb up the lottery board again, and maybe you do get the top 3 pick in the draft, yeah, there could be something there that's an added luxury. And to our draft point earlier, is that another shortstop, center fielder, can't miss pitching prospect? I'm kind of in the position when you're in that spot of the top 3, you just take the best player available. You don't have to draft for need necessarily. So yeah, it could happen. And it would actually probably be a good thing. Their prospect pool is great right now, but it would only be an added bonus if they were able to get a top 3 pick.
Stepping away from the Twins for a minute, just as an overall baseball fan, baseball observer, do you have a pick for who you think has the best chance of going to the World Series and winning it this year? How do you think things are going to play out as we get closer to the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Brewers a lot. They just feel like a team that is built to play postseason baseball, and they have starting pitching and they have depth, and I would love to see what they could do. But Padres are interesting too. Love the San Diego Padres. You know, I know they're in a crowded division there in the West. The AL's wide open, right? I mean, man, I could see Houston kind of running it back here and getting back to the World Series. The Yankees have been scuffling a bit. The Tigers have just not played good baseball essentially for the last couple months. I feel like it's a random. You could pick a name out of a hat right now blindly in the AL and say, yeah, that team's going to win the World Series, and you can say, oh, okay. The NL, though, I like the Brewers a lot. I think the Padres are fun. Like, the Padres are just such a fun brand of ball. They could be in the mix, too. So, AL, I think it's a big shrug emoji right now. And in the NL, probably the Brewers. And I personally, I like watching the Padres, too. So, I would say one of those two teams in the NL.
So, Declan, we want to end this, and we're going to put you on the spot here with a couple fun questions here.
Okay.
We like to do Mount Rushmores with our guests for different topics, usually geographically. So we're going to do one of those. But we also saw that, I'm pretty sure we're correct about this, you're a wrestling fan as well. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Huge wrestling
fan. All right, so
fan. Yeah.
you got 2 big wrestling fans with
Perfect.
you right here. So we want to at least sprinkle that in here. We can't kind of ignore that.
Yeah.
But let's start off with we also know you covered the Vikings. So
Yep.
Minnesota sports overall, all time.
Yeah.
Your Mount Rushmore, Minnesota sports. It could be coaches. It
Yep.
could be players. However you want to do it.
So I think for players to start, I think you have to have Kirby Puckett on there. He was the catalyst for 2 World Series championships, so Kirby is for sure on there. I know there's been a lot made about his off-the-field stuff and his later life post-retirement, but he's the most successful Minnesota athlete of all time, at least for my money. So Kirby is cemented on there, so like basically my George Washington. I would put... This is where it gets like a little bit challenging because there's a lot of like really, really good contenders. You know, I'm going to stick with base. I'm going to put Joe Mauer on there. As someone who grew up in St. Paul, Joe Mauer grew up in St. Paul, anyone, and sometimes St. Paul's like the ugly stepsister of Minneapolis, never gets the attention that maybe it rightfully so deserves. If you were a kid in St. Paul and you were growing up in the 90s, 2000s, you wanted to be Joe Mauer. So like you got to see a dude from St. Paul go to the big leagues, win batting titles, MVP, All-Star games, and then be a first ballot Hall of Famer, which is very difficult to do. Just like Kirby. Kirby was a first ballot Hall of Famer for different accolades. But I put Mauer on there. This is where it gets tough. I think I go Kevin Garnett next from the Timberwolves side.
Yep.
Look, I know the gap between Anthony Edwards and Kevin Garnett is actually a lot closer than I think we've ever realized. And look, the Wolves have now went to back-to-back Western Conference Finals. KG only got there once here with Minnesota. But I think Kevin Garnett being, again, an MVP, perennial all-star, the leader of that team, you know, they never really cashed in on some of those runs they had with him. I put Kevin Garnett third. And then for the Vikings, you know, I can go old school, probably with Fran Tarkington, but I think I go with Randy Moss. I think I stick with Randy because he's obviously changed the entire position in the game, and the second run here didn't go so well, but I think he's the best wide receiver of all time. And again, that gap between like Justin Jefferson and Randy Moss is also a lot closer than I think people realize. But historically, I think I have to put those 4 in. But like the next 4 in, if we were to do a second Mount Rushmore, I think like Ant and Justin Jefferson have made a case to be in the discussion on those next 4.
Before Devin moves on to the wrestling conversation, your thoughts quickly on JJ and where you think he lands right now? Because I feel like the hype is real, the injury last year and Sam Darnold doing what he did, but I mean, you got to be happy with what JJ's done so far in preseason.
Yeah, he looks great, man. The entire goal here, as what I keep saying, is just don't crash the car. Like the car is, in the Vikings case, built up. You got a really good wide receiver, a tight end, got a good running back room. You redid your offensive line, your defense. Actually, your defense might carry you. Like, I know there's offensive weapons for the Vikings, but they might just lean on their defense to be the catalyst of their team. So I think McCarthy is going to be a pretty damn good player. And yeah, just he doesn't have to do too much, which is good. Because typically those rookie quarterbacks that we saw last year, or any first-year quarterback, is asking to save his franchise. And J.J. McCarthy, although playing the most important position in sports, isn't being tasked to do that. So I expect some good results, and they won't win 14 games again. I'd be shocked if they won 14 games again. But do I think that they could be a team built better for playoff football? Yeah, I think they could if J.J. McCarthy does what he's supposed to do.
And what we didn't tell you up front, we're both New Yorkers, but Steve's actually a very hardcore Green Bay Packer fan. So I'm not sure what he was looking for in that answer.
Okay.
I respect the Vikings. I mean, obviously the rivalry and all that, but I respect the Vikings, and we have mutual hatred for the Bears, so it goes there. And we have a neutrality for the Lions, so we're all just like, oh, the Lions are there. We're happy for their success, but it's the Bears suck forever.
You know, I feel like I'm a black sheep with a lot of Vikings fans, and when we do Purple Daily, they don't like when we talk Packers or bring it up. But like, I like Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love's a badass. I really do. I think I don't know if he's going to be Aaron Rodgers level good or Favre level good, but I think he's an athletic freak, and I would not sleep on the Packers. Vikings fans and love to punch down on the Packers, and it goes vice versa too.
Yep.
But that Packers team still should be pretty good. I'm not a huge Matt LaFleur guy, if I'm being honest. I'm not a big LaFleur guy. I think he's kind of whiny. I'm not a big fan of that. But the Packers should still be pretty good, and wouldn't shock me if they won the division this year either.
Yeah, at the risk of having a longer conversation, my opinion on the Packers and really goes with Jordan Love. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. Obviously, injuries hampering last year, but they build the depth, one of the youngest teams in football, if not the youngest team still in football this year coming up. But I love what they're at right now, and I like drafting, obviously, with Matthew Golden, drafting a receiver for the first time in the first round in a very long time. So I'm very excited, and it's going to be great NFC North battles going forward. So I look forward to it.
Love it, man. Love it. Yeah, it's going to be a fun year.
All right, so let's get to the wrestling here real quick. Mount Rushmore, I feel like wrestling fans talk about this all the time. That's like the biggest Mount Rushmore conversation seems to be amongst wrestlers. Now, a lot of people look at it with like the biggest draws and who affected the business the biggest. I don't want you to feel like you're pigeonholed into that type of Mount Rushmore. Your personal Mount Rushmore, maybe it's a favorites who had the most impact on you, who's the most entertaining. You go with it. Right away. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, if I'm being honest. I really do, because my number one has never changed. And that's Shawn Michaels. Like, if you were to give me any prime person in the ring for draw, for ability, for showmanship, for all the stuff, everything that makes a good wrestler, Shawn Michaels to me is the best. And you know, even his second run post Lost My Smile, broken back, retirement thing, I think even his second run might have been better than his first run, which is
match
crazy,
quality wise.
right?
You're right. Those taker matches,
absolutely.
Crushed it.
Like, his first run is right up there with anyone else's tenure, but his second run might have been even better, which is nuts. So Shawn Michaels is the lock. Second for me is Jeff Hardy, who was actually here last night. I went to a concert last night. I am furious. Like Jeff Hardy's probably like my second favorite wrestler of all time, and he threw out the first pitch yesterday at Target Field. I think TNA's in town. I think TNA's doing a thing here today or maybe this weekend. But Jeff Hardy's up there for me, and just in terms of charisma, and I mean, you talk about a face and a baby face and being over with. There was never a period, at least in WWE, where like Jeff Hardy was a heel and leaned into it. Like, he was too lovable to not do it, and he got himself into so much trouble with his out of the ring stuff with drugs and alcohol, which is like so unfortunate, because when he did win that first WWE title, like, that is still to me, like, in terms of best first title wins of all time, that one's up there, man. Like, he finally does it, right? So Jeff Hardy's in there for me. I'd put Stone Cold 3. So I'll go a little bit more of like the traditional one there that is probably on most people's Mount Rushmore. Again, not a long peak, right? Like, I mean, he was really only like 5 or 6 years, and also battled a ton of injuries, but probably one of the best on the microphones there ever was. And like tactically and in ring style, he lacks. Like he has the Stone Cold Stunner, which is maybe like ironically enough, like one of the sickest finishers of all time. But like he's just gonna stomp a mud hole in your ass, right? And he's gonna like play the hits in the ring. But everything else around him and his aura was super cool. Fourth one here, because like there's a lot of contenders that I really really like. I really like CM Punk, but like I keep coming to the same conclusion over the last like year. Watching him try to go for 25 minutes is the most painful thing in the world. He's gassed, man. Like
Yeah, he's not the same. He's not the same.
I will not throw any stones at anyone's physique or preparation to be the best human being they can. But like, bro, can you get some cardio in? Like you are just like dead by the time we're 15 minutes into a match. You like can barely get the guy up before I get to sleep. So like that one's up there. You know, again, I like that you preface this with don't feel like you have to go like cheesy and the normal stuff, because like I could say Undertaker. I'm not a big Rock guy. I'm really not a big Rock guy, especially this new Rock. I can't stand it. I'm not a huge fan. You know what though? I am kind of gonna be a little cheesy, but I'm gonna give him his props. I'm putting Cena fourth.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Mostly because, you know, and he gets chastised for like being the face of the era of the other guys, you know, like Michaels and Stone Cold and The Rock after them. But he carried the company, man. Like he absolutely carried the company. I know there's been, you know, the "you can't wrestle" chants, and then he does improve, but he is the face to WWE of a lot of, you know, every WWE generation goes in, you know, from Hulk Hogan to The Undertaker to now John Cena, like. And now we're seeing with Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins, whoever you want it to be. So for like 15 years, or maybe more like, 10 or 15 years, he was the face of the entire company. And I love Cena. I think Cena's gets way too much heat for some of the stuff that people say he can't do. So I think that's a pretty good list. I think Shawn Michaels, Jeff Hardy, Stone Cold, and Cena. I would throw, again, like RVD, loved Rob Van Dam as a kid. I love the high flyers, so like Rey Mysterio, Rob Van Dam, Hardy Boys. I was much more of those style of wrestler. But yeah, there's some great stuff, man. I still watch wrestling. I know it's nerdy and people are confused.
We do too.
But like it's and it makes my blood boil, and I'm sure it does for you guys. Like, oh, you guys know it's fake, right? Like, go turn on the damn television and show me your favorite TV show, and I'm gonna probably be able to come to the conclusion that was scripted and also fake. Like, so what are we arguing here? Makes no sense.
No, very, very true. That's the best argument to make. And the thing about Cena, I will say, and growing up being a teenager during his run, I was rooting against all the heels that were wrestling Cena. And one thing I've gained respect for, I work in independent wrestling and I do ring announcing, and all the wrestlers that are coming up now that are born in 2002 or 2003 or even 2000, they identified John Cena as the rock solid reason that they are a wrestling fan and eventually doing what they did. He inspired a whole generation to do that. And you got to give respect. He was the face there. And in my opinion, a down period, the PG era, definitely not my favorite time to be a wrestling fan, but he was the guy. And honestly, whether it's Make-A-Wish or being a role model for all these people, he's never made a misstep, in my opinion. So shout out to John Cena.
Yeah, man. I love John. John's awesome.
I'm with you on Michaels too. He was always my favorite. I went from Macho Man, Michaels, Kurt Angle, and those are all work rate guys.
Yeah.
And then I'm a punk guy. I know Steve is anti, but I can't defend his work rate anymore. He brought me back to wrestling after years off with all the pipe bomb stuff and all that stuff. So like, I still love to listen to him on the mic, and you know he gets into it. But yeah, it's tough to watch, like you said, the 25-minute matches with him. He struggles nowadays, but you know, glad to have him back at least.
Kurt Angle's a good one. You know, like I was just watching like on like TikToks, they like showed an old school JBL promo, and man, as a kid, I hated JBL because I was like too naive and too young enough to not really still understand the differences between heels and faces. But you look back on it, man, he was like the best. He dug into that so well. I did at age 11, 12, however old I was. I did not appreciate prime JBL because when I go back and watch some of the stuff he used to say, and even doing the ring, like that dude would beat the crap out of people legitimately. That was an interesting era of wrestling. Kurt Angle's up there for me too. I love me some Kurt.
Dude, JBL's run was so interesting because I remember when they took him from being a tag guy immediately, like almost overnight, and said, "All right, we're going
Yeah.
to give him the gimmick of being what you do on screen for Fox News and being an analyst and all that." And then he put the cowboy hat. The limo came out. There's a story for JBL, and we got to get out of here because I know you got to go. But there's a story about JBL where Public Enemy, if you remember Public Enemy from ECW, they were in the back before a Sunday Night Heat match. And I'm not sure if you guys know this story, but there was a conversation. And one of the guys in Public Enemy said, "I'm not doing X, Y, and Z because it's going to make us look bad." So JBL and Farouk went out there and beat the ever-living shit out of Public Enemy, and they were never seen
real
in
life,
WWF again.
too. Yeah.
Real life just absolutely destroyed him. So real life tough guy, big Texan dude who's smart as hell, too. And like you said, got heat in all different ways, saying things you could not say today in any sort of scene ever.
I don't know. I feel like with some of the stuff he did, like at the border, maybe it works again. Unfortunately, with the state of our affairs.
What's old is new again.
But to your point, like I had like a period there when I was a kid. Like I faintly remember like the Attitude Era because I was born in '92. But like I faintly remember Attitude Era and the early transition. And then I like didn't watch wrestling live from like 2002 to 2004 ish. And I remember being so perplexed that like I was like, wait. APA, that's the same Bradshaw from APA? I was like, no, it's not. I remember like having to be convinced of it for a long time. I was like, that's not the same guy. I was like, no, it's the same guy. They did a great job molding him. That's true.
So Declan, we really appreciate you joining us for this. We'll give you the platform here to hype up what you're doing at Dex's tweets. You guys can get over there and check out everything with on Purple Daily, SKOR North Twins show, but I'll give you the platform right now to hype up everything going on your end.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So the SKOR North Twin Show, if you like baseball and you like information on the Twins, that's the place to be. We have Trevor Plouffe, who joins us weekly, too, on the show. Phil Mackey, Judd Zolgad, and myself usually record about 3 to 4 episodes a week. I hop on here from the ballpark, typically after, like, pregame access before first pitch, just to update fans on anything that's going on in the clubhouse or any roster transactions, rumors, latest stuff like that, et cetera. So you can go to the SKOR North Twin Show on YouTube, subscribe to there. And, we have Purple Daily, that's our biggest show. That's a daily Vikings podcast and video form show. So you can go to Purple Daily to subscribe to Daily Vikings Entertainment. And, go check out all of our stuff at SKOR North. If you like the Wild, the Wolves, we're just launching a new Gopher football show or Gopher athletic show. So if you're into the Golden Gophers, you can subscribe to that too. And we're looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, guys. I mean, I'll talk wrestling all day long, so it's probably a good thing, I guess, maybe we bow out, because I could go another 50 minutes talking about JBL being a racist that maybe works in 2025 or something. So,
but we look forward to having you on in the future, maybe in the offseason when the Twins have some more clarity about what's going on and if a big deal goes on, and hopefully we get some more resolution on what's happening with the ownership side of things and maybe the stadium. But Declan, we'll catch you on the other side of this.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, we want to thank Declan one more time for hopping on, talking all things Minnesota Twins. Devin, I know we've been discussing having someone on to discuss really the chaotic season that the Twins have undergone so far, and a perfect time to have him on post-trade deadline. And again, I want to thank him so much for being here with us.
Yeah, Twins, one of the last teams that we had not checked off as far as having a team-centric episode. And not for lack of trying, I'm glad I came across Declan and his work. Super level-headed guy, fun to talk to. I thought it gave great perspective.
So just an update on our schedule on our end. Devin is going to be traveling a little bit, so I believe we're going to have a little bit of a gap from now until maybe next weekend or so for another episode. That's why we wanted to pack one more episode for a 2-week edition here. So just want to give you guys the update on that. We'll be back talking baseball in general, but Devin, if you want to just hype up some other stuff going on your end.
Yeah, so I'll be away from I believe the 24th to the 29th. Obviously, we'll still be active on social media, and you can interact with us that way as well, or go back and listen to some evergreen episodes. I mean, I'm wearing the Baseball's Last Dive Bar shirt, which was a great episode, I think in the episode 20 something. So that's from a while ago, but interesting to listen to about the A's exit from Oakland. And there's a lot of other ones out there too, but we'll try to get another episode out either very end of August or maybe the very beginning of September. And at that point, we'll try to keep it rolling like we usually do, 1 or 2 a week. But yes, follow us on social media to stick with us, and we'll put as much content out as we can while we're kind of away from the microphones a little bit.
Yeah, and that Tablesetters Pod is where you can find us on Instagram and on Twitter. As Devin mentioned, even though we won't be posting an episode next week, we will be posting on there. Devin interacting with some polls, of course. Check out Instagram if you have any questions or comments about this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing some conversation about the Twins, because I know that they were right in the spotlight. It was hot on
Yeah.
them for a second with the trade deadline, but things have cooled off. When that news story dropped with the Pohlads coming out and saying they're not selling the team, it was the perfect time to have Declan come on. And there's been some divisive conversation on both sides. It seems like most people fall in the camp of what Declan was conveying to us, but there's other people that have a completely different opinion, and it's really torn the franchise into two different sections of who they support and who they don't.
Yeah, after talking to Declan, I almost feel like it might be more annoyance at the ownership not changing now, and less so the teardown. I think the combination hurts, but I think people could have gotten behind it if it was like, all right, they're doing this kind of to prepare the sale. But now for him to kind of go back on his word and say, just kidding, we're staying. And it's like, well, you just got rid of all that payroll not to sell. I think that rubs people the wrong way. I said before this interview for a couple weeks since the trade deadline, to me, there's a big part of me that likes what the Twins did, as hard as it is to swallow to see so many players not given away, but traded away. I just see the AL Central. Maybe you see it differently, Steve. I see the AL Central as a division that might not take that long to get back into the thick of, especially with all the talent they either already have up, young talent, or that's on the fringe. And then even a couple years away, I think they might be in a good situation. The lower payroll and not being able to add to that young talent, obviously that could be a problem. Declan brought up that the bullpen was just decimated. So unless you find a bunch of dudes in your system that can fill those spots, if you're not going to go spend or be creative with trades, that could obviously be a problem. But I mean, offensively, I really like the young talent they have. I really do. I think they could be a very fun team to watch in a year or two. If we're being optimistic. Pitching, he laid it out. Like, there's a chance the pitching staff ends up being pretty decent, especially at the top. Very soon, if everyone can stay healthy. And the bullpen seems to be the biggest question mark going forward.
I do agree with you that the AL Central seems to be in a state of flux from season to season. I know the Tigers look like they were going to run away and hide for the longest time. This is going to be their division to lose. But let's not count out any of the teams the way Detroit has played during the stretch of the season. I know they got a big win today and they're starting to hit again. But it feels like at any point, and we talked about at the beginning of the year, that the Twins could have grabbed up and been that team that we were expecting other teams to be. And same thing with the Royals. Like, we have looked at these teams as the short rebuild. We thought the Royals were going to be bottoming out for a bit, and they've made everybody excited about what they have in-house here. And it just takes a really good start next year for the first 2 months, and these young players like Luke Keeschel and leading the way, and maybe Royce Lewis staying healthy and Byron Buxton doing the same thing. All of a sudden, you look at completely different reputation for this team going in. You just have to excite this fan base. And right now they're downtrodden. They're upset of everything that went on, but winning cures all. Deodorant is what you need here. But we shall see. I mean, the thing is, they've made a lot of decisions, tough ones, but it will come down to the finances. Like you said before, I think we keep circling around the conversation, but if the ownership will spend on this team, we know that they have the ability to put a product on the field that people want to see.
Yeah, they just got to build depth. I mean, I will say, I was very shocked in preseason when Pacoda and other ranking systems were putting the Twins at the top of the AL Central, like projecting them. I just never understood it, partially because their biggest three stars are injury riddled, right, every season seemingly. So build some depth. Like, you don't want to have to kind of hope and pray and keep your fingers crossed that everyone's just going to stay healthy. Like, you have to know, like, if this guy gets hurt, we'll be okay because we have A, B, and C. And, you know, like, that's the system they're going to have to put in place going forward. You still have Royce Lewis and Byron Buxton as a big part of this team that are 2/3 of those stars that I'm alluding to. Correa's the other one. Now, you kind of got him out of the way, still paying some of the contract, but got someone to take him off your hands. So we'll see going forward if their biggest players, their impact players, can stay healthy, stay on the field, and when they go down, if they have a system in place where they can kind of keep their head above water for the time being.
So again, we will be back very, very soon talking all things baseball for the stretch run of the season. 2 more months left, 30-plus games for every team. So put on your seatbelts and get ready for the ride. Until that point, we'll be back